Oh, it is. Oh, it's already recording.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
And we have this unlimited time. Yep, because it's not August 28th. Great.
It's not August 28th.
Perfect.
Come on, chameleon. I just wish this could stay for once in your goddamn life.
I know, seriously.
Okay, I think this is okay right here. Perfect. If you just stay right there.
Perfect.
Take a picture of the story.
Oh, yes.
We're on the same side this time.
Also, Evan, my high school boyfriend, unfollowed me.
Is he going through a mental break?
I truly don't know, because I was so curious after he started following me. He was watching my stories every single time, and then he wasn't, and I was like, huh. And he unfollowed.
Do you think his wife was like, who is that? Why?
Literally, that's what I think. I wonder.
That is so crazy.
Release this.
Release it. Release the tapes.
Release the tapes.
That is truly wild,
Isn't
though.
that crazy and so weird? Why? What's the whole even point?
I feel like he was either drunk or curious and was like, I'm just going to do it. And then he got reprimanded or felt guilty.
Yes, exactly. He either got reprimanded or was like, I shouldn't. I can't. I don't have eyes. God damn it. God damn it. It just comes on and we're just like.
Yeah, we're like, hey.
Hey, Ben.
Pan.
Hey, Ben.
Pan. Yeah.
Or the executive producer could not be nicer. It's about to go into recording. Y'all feel okay about getting to set. He's like, we're good. We got you. Take your time. Angel.
God, angels.
I know. He's so nice.
How's Nick Ramsey been?
I truly
I literally was like, it's
all coming back.
It truly all came back. And then all this stuff.
It's so funny that you say that because truly his essence, I'm just like, you're annoying.
He's annoying. He has Republican sexist energy.
I truly try to avoid. The director is having everyone, but the director of the past 2 days and today is having everyone vote for who they think is the kindest and has helped out the most on set. And I was like, and she's Venmoing them $100, which I was like, I want $100, but I do not want to go talk to people.
Whoever is the kindest? That seems not fair.
Every safety meeting, it should go to a PA. But every safety meet, our PAs are amazing.
It should go to the fucking what's above a PA?
Production coordinator?
Yes,
but that's me because we don't have.
It should go to you because PAs get paid so much fucking money.
Not these PAs don't.
Oh, the PAs on Game Awards got paid more than I did as production coordinator.
That should never happen.
Because they got overtime because they were hourly and I didn't. I just got weekly.
Well, that is true. But on this job, I've been able to leave. I would never want to be a PA ever. It's 10:30 and we're just talking. So yeah, no, I would never want to do that. Mm-hmm.
No, I would never. Okay, we should start recording this.
Oh yeah, good idea. Good idea.
But yeah, I think Katie would always leave. I think she got $1,500 a week, and I would get I think I got $1,100 a week. That fucked up.
Crazy.
I know.
For a production coordinator, you got $1,100 a week. I'm supposed to get $1,500 a week, and I'm like, this is the lowest.
Oh, I got $1,300 a week, but Katie would get more.
That is crazy. Oh my god. Okay. It's fine. We're ourselves. Be ourselves.
Hello, Ben.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Hold on, you're not coming through my headphones. I gotta figure this out. Okay, let me put this audio through.
This could be us, honestly.
Do you have any suggestions? We might be doing it wrong.
This should be plugged in. Hold on.
We're plugged in.
No, this is definitely on my end. Hold on. Our audio interface. Sorry, 1 second.
No, you're good.
Truly no rush.
This is us every time.
Literally.
All right. Hopefully that.
Can you hear us through your headphones?
There we go. Yes.
Perfect.
I had to adjust this. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes.
Loud-ish, clear-ish? Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
It sounds great. Are you cool if we record this?
I'm totally cool. Do you want me to record the audio on my end, or are you?
Do you mind just in
Yeah.
case for safety?
I do not mind.
Ah, amazing.
You just never know.
You truly never know.
It's true.
Technology
Very
is a
true.
scary, scary thing.
I'm sorry for the weird sort of strange like pink lighting. This is all the lights that are in the room.
I like it.
So I don't know if this is the vibe you're looking for. It's kind of calming.
No, it is. I was
The
going to say, are you in
nice-
the one and only Natch Butte studio?
Oh, I am.
Wow.
I'm in the only one and only Natch Butte studio.
It's
Wow.
like seeing a celebrity.
I mean, if
Just
you
the
wanna see a
walls.
real celebrity. Here is the slogan: "Cream your neck."
Ah.
Right there.
Stunning.
God, it's cool.
You're only legit if you have your tagline made into a neon light mounted on your wall.
We can only hope.
I know. I was like, are we trash?
We are trash.
No,
That is for sure.
I think you can fix it. There's a way to fix it. Very
That is
easily.
true. We have the resources, but
That was a cheap light.
oh,
Well, we'll call you one day when we get our neon sign.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, we're so excited, / nervous a little bit because this is your first guest. So thank
Wow.
you again
Okay.
for doing this before we start. But
My pleasure. I'm honored.
true. Yeah. So the tone of our podcast is very much like there are no dumb questions in life, and we
Mhm.
feel like when you're little, you're like constantly reminded that in elementary and middle school, everyone's just like, it's fine, ask whatever. And then we get older and people feel that pressure and have this fear to just sort of like ask the questions. And so we thought of you because obviously everything right now it's a lot of information, it's a little scary, it's confusing. And so we had our listeners just writing questions of like literally what the hell is even the like electoral college, which great question because
I feel like we
What
hear
is it?
about it, and yeah, we'll get into that with the questions. But
Yeah.
yeah, we just really want it to be like a open, approachable space always.
Great. I love it.
perfect. So yeah, we did your intro and everything.
Oh, you did? Okay,
In
cool.
pre-recordings. We don't have to
Great.
just, you don't have to sit and just
But we can just say amazing things about you and all your accomplishments again.
this
This
is
is fun to
true.
hear.
My first question is when you came up with OMG WTF, were you like, I'm a genius that this works out that way?
No, I was not. I was looking at a list of governor's races on my phone with my dad. I'd actually just left my job because I wanted to do something. Well, I was about to leave my job because I wanted to do something political for the 2018 midterms. And I was looking at a list of governor's races on my phone, and I started deleting the ones that I thought were not as important or competitive. And I just kind of whittled down to a list of like 12. And then I think just some of those happened to be like close in order. And so it kind of popped out.
Perfect.
Damn, it is perfect. It truly took me like a hot second to figure that out. Like Kanal has the hat, and I just was like, oh, that's so fun. And then when I was reading your bio, I was like, oh, what is wrong with me? How did I not make this
It's
connection?
just so clever.
Well, the states that it represents, Ohio, Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin, Texas, Florida, not all of those are competitive anymore. Ohio is not a competitive state. I mean, Texas at times has been competitive, at times has not been competitive. So it's hard to keep that organization. It's not up and running anymore. It was specific to the 2018 midterms because the states change and you're not necessarily focused on those same races 4 years later. So it's kind of, I gotta come up with a new acronym, I guess.
Well, we do always say there's nothing sexier than a blue Texas.
We do always say that.
True.
We mentioned that far too
And I
often.
will stand behind it.
I have a trivia question for you quickly off
Oh,
of that
God.
question. What was the last time? What year was the last time a candidate, a Democrat, won statewide in Texas?
Was it as okay, this might be crazy. Was it as far back as the 60s with Johnson?
No, it's more recent than that.
Okay. That was crazy.
Oh God, I
Statewide. I don't know.
I don't know. The 80s?
No, close. 1994. It's been 28 years.
Oh, for the
since-
presidential.
For
Or no, for governor.
the lieutenant governor. This is a deep cut. I
1994.
realize. 1994 was the last time that a Democrat won statewide in Texas, the lieutenant governor's race.
Wow.
And every single elected official since then in Texas statewide has been a Republican.
Do you think that will ever change? How long will that take?
I do think it will. Well, it's interesting. I would have said could potentially happen this cycle. There's a really competitive race. I don't know if this is one of the questions you wanted to get to, but there's a really competitive race happening for attorney general in Texas. A woman named Rochelle Garza, Hispanic woman, is running for the seat to unseat the current attorney general, who I think is running for his third term. Fun fact, in Texas, there are no term limits for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general. So you can just, if you keep winning elections, you could have that job forever.
That's terrifying.
You
What
can
is
never
your
be turned
thoughts?
out.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on like term limits and stuff? And like, if you think it's important, why?
I think it depends on the office. I think for something like an important executive position like governor, I think there should absolutely be term limits. I mean, it kind of is too close to like a monarchy, a king,
Yeah.
in my opinion. If you can just keep winning elections, I will say for legislative elections, whether it's in states or in Congress, I think to experience. I mean, there's a huge learning curve in terms of knowing how to get things passed, how to negotiate, and how to sort of and also like relationship building, right? That's a huge part of passing laws, is building relationships. So if you have term limits, it's hard, you're forcing people to have new relationships every couple of terms. I do think that you could have term limits in the, some have proposed like 3 terms for Senate. So that's 18 years. So that's a pretty good chunk of time to make relationships and get stuff done. As far as House races, some have proposed 5, so that's 10 years limit. More than that a little, but I'm not opposed to term limits, but I think capping it at like 2 or 3 terms in the House, that's just a massive amount of turnover and a huge learning curve. And I think there is something to building relationships, building a reputation, being able to get stuff done across the aisle based on those relationships.
Right.
But I don't think people should just be allowed to serve in perpetuity.
Right.
Yeah, it gets a little clicky, doesn't it?
It does.
It's like you got to branch out.
It's always just high school.
Well,
Everything's high school.
Before that is true. High school never leaves us in
Never.
so many different ways.
Unfortunately.
Before we get into some of our questions from our listeners, Ben, do you just want to give us a little history of how you got here, how you're so smart, how you know so much?
Sure. It was forced on me. I had no say. I happened to be born in Washington, D.C., and I had my family worked in government. So they worked in the federal government, they worked with the federal government, and so the topic of conversation at the dinner table literally every night was government. And my parents would unwind by watching, comedy about the government, whether it was late night shows or, The Daily Show or anything else that sort of satirizing the news of the day. This is just what was on in my house and what was talked about at the dinner table. And I didn't even really get much of that education in school. And I went to school in DC. I got 1 year of government, I think, in 8th grade, and nothing beyond that. And then I ended up studying that in college, and all my sort of entertainment jobs, whether it was Funny or Die or other, freelance gigs, they all kind of pointed me toward the intersection of comedy and politics, and really using humor not to sort of like scrape the surface jokes and make like jokes about Trump's like sort of like the low-hanging fruit, but to use it as a way to help inform people, to help explain something that is complicated and confusing, but to use humor as a vehicle to simplify it.
I love
I
that.
love that too, because what do you remember from school? Like, I don't even remember government. I truly don't remember any class that taught me what I think I should know now.
We had a civics class, but it was definitely not taught through humor,
No.
which is like,
I imagine
why?
most of them are not.
Yeah.
Why not? But maybe they should be. How
Why
many
not?
classes did you get in school? I'm actually really curious about this, and I'll explain why in a second. But how many civics or government classes did you get between kindergarten and 12th grade?
I know I got 1 civics class, and then with like I guess with like AP history or US history, you kind of learn through that, but it wasn't like specifically just government. And then there was an option that you could take AP Gov later, but it wasn't like a required class. The only required class I remember is civics, and it was my freshman year,
And was that a full year?
a full year.
Okay.
I think I had a civics class. I want to say it was sophomore year for a semester. I mean, not a lot.
Only 8 states require a year of civics at some point between kindergarten and 12th grade.
That is crazy. This is how
What
we are
state? What
built.
state? Can I ask what state you were in?
Arkansas.
Oh, interesting.
Well, for me, California.
I think California. Now that's required. So some schools may opt to teach
Mm.
more than that.
Right.
But today, only 8 states require a minimum of a year of civics or government at any point between kindergarten and 12th grade.
I feel like maybe we should like teach it more. We should know what's going on in our government, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's so much of high school. Like you think now, like, God, it'd be nice to know, like when you're 22, you're like, would have been nice to know how to do taxes. Like maybe there should be a full year on that, you know?
What's even more ironic is the reason we have public education in the first place is largely to teach people how the government works. In fact, the first pitch for a national university in the history of the United States was in 1796. George Washington used his final State of the Union speech to pitch Congress on creating a national university to teach everyone how the government works. And that didn't end up happening, but that idea began to circulate. And so it was like, okay, well, why don't we have public education? We have schools to help make people model citizens and teach them how the government works so they can participate. So that was actually one of the main, if not the main, early reasons for having a public education system in the first place. And today, fast forward a couple hundred years, only 8 states require at least a year of it.
That is crazy. My jaw is dropped. You know so much. You've
I
got to come
know
to one
I
of our
know a lot about a very small amount of things. So
You've
you
gotta come
happen
to
to
one
be
of our trivia
catching me
nights.
on those. I'd love to.
Oh, that's true. Kanal is the reigning champ so far. He likes to boast about it to everyone.
Queen Crush.
Interesting. Very interesting.
You guys would be unstoppable.
It would be scary for other people.
It would be. It would be.
Well, shall we dive into some questions? Thank you, everyone who wrote in. You know, we just tried to reiterate that it's a safe space. There are no dumb questions, and there's a lot of shit going on right now in this country.
Yes. Also, Ben, I have to tell you, my aunt started your book yesterday and finished it yesterday.
Wow.
One day. She loves retirement, and that is the way that she filled her day. But she loved it.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yes, so exciting. But yeah, should we start with the questions? So we've been hearing a lot about the Supreme Court lately. Can you just explain to our listeners what exactly the Supreme Court does in a way that you would explain it to a 5th grader who's learning about it for the first time?
Think of the Supreme Court kind of like umpires and referees. And they are umpires and referees for really, really 2 things. One is the Constitution, and 2 is federal laws. So the job of the court is to, if there are controversies or arguments or disputes over what this part of the Constitution means, or whether or not this law that Congress just passed is constitutional, the Supreme Court is the body that decides whether it is or whether it isn't. So today, it doesn't have to have 9 justices, but ever since 1869, that's been the number that's set by Congress. And these 9 people get to decide what the Constitution means and what our laws mean and solve any disputes around either one.
So Congress decides how many members of the Supreme Court there are,
That's correct.
but then the president elects the
So
judge.
Congress sets the number of justices so they can pass a law and say we're going to have, so at first we had 6 judges. So the Congress for the first 100 years or so, or less than 100 years, we changed the number all the time. We started with 6, then down to 5, then 6, then 7, then 9, then 10, then down to 7, and then back to 9. And then that's been where it's been since 1869. But if there are vacancies on the court, so let's say because Supreme Court justices serve for life, unless they die or quit or they get impeached and removed. And we've never impeached and removed a Supreme Court justice. We've impeached one justice, but didn't remove that person. That was 200 plus years ago. Because they get to serve for life. If they quit or step down, there's a vacancy. And so what happens is it's the president's job to nominate somebody to the court, and then it's the Senate's job to confirm that person to the court. So it's a nomination and confirmation process.
Got it.
Interesting. So interesting.
That is so interesting.
So when you see on Twitter, like those videos, when a Supreme Court hearing is happening, whether it was, recent examples, Amy Coney Barrett or Ketanji Brown Jackson or Brett Kavanaugh, you see them sort of sitting before this panel of people. That's the Senate Judiciary Committee. And so those members of that committee, those senators, are asking that person questions to try to see if they're going to be an initial judge, if they have the qualifications, if they're up to par in those senators' minds, and then it moves to if it passes that committee, if those senators vote on that person, then it goes to a floor vote. The entire Senate votes, and as of today, these days you only need a majority vote to pass. But it used to be subject to the filibuster, where you actually needed 60 votes to confirm somebody.
Got it. And is it really hard to impeach somebody? Like, why has no one ever been impeached, or
So,
one person?
It's a great question. It is very hard to, impeaching someone only takes a majority vote in the House. So so it's like a two-step process, right? The House impeaches federal officials, so they can impeach members of the executive branch. They can impeach judges, not just Supreme Court judges, but circuit court judges, district court judges, really any federal judge. But we've only impeached, I want to say, about 20 people in the history of the United States. And less than half of those were actually then removed from office. So then it goes to the Senate for like a trial, not like a criminal trial, but like a impeachment trial. And you need two-thirds of senators, so 67, in order to convict. And the punishment upon conviction is removal from the office that you hold. And then the Senate takes a second vote whether or not to bar you from ever holding federal office again.
Gosh, it's such a process. I mean, I feel like I really started understanding this a little bit more in like 2016 to when Trump was elected, and then during the Brett Kavanaugh trial. And I was like, oh, you can't just be like, oh, these people have some bad allegations. This was said. There's proof of this. Like, I feel like when I was a teenager, I was always just like, impeach them.
Right.
The solution.
Well, we came. I don't know how. I'm significantly older than both of you, but when I was younger, I remember, the Clinton impeachment trial. I was 12, I think, when that happened.
Oh, wow.
12 or 13. So I remember was sort of starting to follow politics, and like that was top of mind, and watching that unfold and go to the Senate. But impeachment of presidents is extremely rare. There have been 3 presidents have been impeached, 4 impeachments total. So 3 in our lifetime, and then the first one that ever happened was after the Civil War. Andrew Johnson was impeached. But it's a very rare thing. But it seems to happen a lot for presidents in our lifetime, which is strange.
Do you think that has to do? This might be silly or dumb, but do you think that has to do anything with like technology and the rise of technology and just more information being spread and then like public uproar?
It's possible. I think absolutely that the spread of information, or I should say the spread of polarizing information, is having an effect on the electorate. The fact that everyone is able to see information immediately when it happens, or reporting on something that when it happens, but also the way that the algorithms that present us the information decide what we want to see. They want to get, they're designed to get a rise out of us, to either make us really happy or really sad or really mad, or any sort of really strong reaction, because that keeps us kind of watching the platform. So we're definitely being presented with a lot of emotional information, I think, on a scale that we really never have been before. But I also think that just the nature of polarization among our elected representatives may be, driven by that as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I don't really remember a time before information was so quick and accessible. Like when I was in high school, that was, during Facebook statuses, and everything was just overwhelming access to opinions. And I think it's interesting to think about like our parents, of, them having a newspaper, and it's just completely different worlds in that realm.
I don't also want to clarify that polarization isn't a new phenomenon. We've obviously been polarized many times in our history, but a lot of experts who study polarization say that our level of polarization right now is at its most extreme level since the Civil War.
Wow.
I mean, I've never wasn't in the Civil War time, but I could see how it feels like that.
Totally.
Seemed pretty polarized. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, which is a good segue to a lot of questions that we got. Obviously, have to do with the political climate, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and I think after that happened, obviously there was a lot of paranoia and a lot of fear of the Supreme Court coming for other issues like gay marriage and interracial marriage, and we were wondering if you could speak on the reality of those fears, how you sort of see that, going. I think a lot of the dialogue has been like they've been planning, you know, Roe v. Wade for years, and this has all been part of this intricate plan. Like, do you think that's similar with gay and interracial marriage?
It definitely has been a long-term plan to overturn Roe versus Wade among people in conservative circles, right? I mean, even the creation of think tanks um, to push for that to happen. Also, organizations that recommend judges, places like the Federalist Society, you know, they suggest judges for Republican presidents to nominate to the Supreme Court who they believe will overturn Roe versus Wade when given the chance. So it's not hyperbole to say that this has been a 40 plus year plan
Damn.
to do this among the right of this country, the conservative wings of this country. I don't know if it's quite comparable to same-sex marriage. I would say maybe in sort of the opposite way, where there's been a long concerted effort to legalize it. You know, there was I believe, you know, I'm trying to think when the first sort of like major Democratic figure came out for same-sex marriage. I mean, look back to the 90s. President Clinton signed a bill called the Defense of Marriage Act, recognizing straight marriages as recognized by the in the federal government's eyes. So I mean, look how far we've come in just 2 decades. Going, I think that was 1996, going from the federal
That's
government
crazy.
clarifying by law, I should say, by law, that they will recognize straight marriages. And then 2 decades later, the Supreme Court saying that same-sex marriage is a fundamental right. So to answer your question, I think there is interest in reversing that decision among certain justices. Obviously, the reason that this is being discussed is because in a concurring opinion that Clarence Thomas put out for the Dobbs decision, he mentioned that other cases that are built on similar logic, or decisions that were built on similar logic, which is the right to privacy, and that being an unenumerated right. So just to step back a little bit, the Constitution specifically says some rights that we have, and then it doesn't mention others, but the Supreme Court is allowed to decide which rights are implied by parts of the Constitution. So obviously abortion is not specifically mentioned in this document because it was written over 200 years ago by 55 white dudes, you know, in a tiny room in Philadelphia with no AC. Abortion wasn't exactly top of mind for these people.
Sounds miserable.
It does sound miserable, but the Supreme Court has recognized that, you know, there is a part of the Constitution that says you can't be deprived of life, liberty, and property without a fair legal process. So what does liberty mean? Well, liberty includes things like privacy. The right to an abortion, according to the Supreme Court in the Roe decision, fell under privacy, which falls under liberty. So, you know, it's a bit of a couple logical steps, but the Constitution is also really short. It's less than 8,000 words. So not everything is in there. And it is the Supreme Court's job, or one of their jobs, their responsibilities to say what it means. And that includes deciding what rights it should be recognized that may not be explicitly mentioned. So with same-sex marriage, obviously this decision in 2015 legalized it, but Clarence Thomas in his Dobbs concurring opinion said that we should revisit other cases that are built on similar logic, which would include same-sex marriage, which would include same-sex sex. In the 2003 case, Lawrence v. Texas was about a gay male couple in Texas that was having sex as consensual people do.
I've heard of it.
And according to Texas's own state laws, they had anti-sodomy laws, and so that was illegal. And it wasn't legalized until 2003 in Texas, when the Supreme Court struck down that anti-sodomy law. And the person who is running, as I mentioned earlier, in Texas, Rochelle Garza, is running for attorney general. The person she's running against, who's the sitting attorney general, wants to bring that law back to recriminalize same-sex sex.
Texas listeners, do you hear that?
Do you
So
understand why we
that's-
came for you?
That
our
is
last
not my
episode?
opinion. That is what he has gone on the record to say. So yes, other cases like that, and also contraception. The right to contraception was recognized by the Supreme Court in, I believe, 1966. And then a few years later, it was recognized. That was for married couples. A few years later, it was recognized for unmarried couples, which is really insane to think about, that we didn't necessarily have the fundamental right to contraception, whether we're married or not married, until the
Right.
60s and 70s. But all of those cases are rest on the same logic as the right to an abortion, and so those are potentially on the proverbial chopping block, I guess, for the Supreme Court.
It is just scary to me that the Constitution was written so long ago. We live in a completely different world. Like, if the founding fathers saw what we were doing at this moment, they couldn't even wrap their head around it. And that a group of people interpret it. It's wild.
It feels unfair.
Well, there is definitely a movement among many to put term limits on the Supreme Court, and there's dispute over whether or not that would require a constitutional amendment. Some people say it does, some say it doesn't, because one proposal is to give people terms of 18 years on the Supreme Court, and then you don't get removed from. You still are a judge, but you sort of you go down to the circuit court. So you kind of cycle through judges, if that makes sense, rather than them having to step down from their position. So it's unclear if that's constitutional or not, but it's been proposed, and it's definitely been brought up in a couple recent debates and discussions around Supreme Court reform.
Yeah, it is just crazy to think about. Like, I think the whole Roe v. Wade being overturned just really made me think that it's fascinating. It's also concerning. Like, there's just so many things about the Supreme Court that seem just, I'm like, how can this happen? And I think especially with the abortion conversation, it's like, don't these men and contraceptives, like, don't they not want to have children? Like, don't they also want control over it? Like, obviously a woman is the one who has to have an abortion, but it's like, it takes two to tango, I always say. And like, don't you just want to put your girlfriend on the pill if you like, don't they have that motivation, or no?
Right. Well, it begs the question, is this about preventing abortion, or is it about forcing birth? Because there are ways to prevent abortion through things like contraception, which if you don't like abortion, why would you not support that? But there's a significant number of people, elected leaders, who oppose abortion and also oppose contraception. So the question is, why do you want to force birth, and who are you trying to force birth for?
Right. Well,
Totally.
controlling of women.
It's tough.
It is tough.
But speaking of abortion rights, can you explain what just happened in Kansas?
Sure. So what happens when when something isn't specifically mentioned in the Constitution? It's really a state issue. So abortion has long been something that's been decided at the state level. It was a state issue before it was recognized as a fundamental right in Roe versus Wade. Even after that, states would still pass abortion laws. Some were found to be unconstitutional, some were not. But states have the ability to make their own laws about what happens in their state. And so what happened was the Kansas legislature, the Kansas State House, State Senate, put a constitutional amendment to the Kansas state constitution, because every state has its own constitution, and it's totally separate from the federal constitution. A state constitutional amendment on the ballot in the primaries to decide whether or not the Kansas constitution should continue to recognize a woman's right to choose. And it was a little bit of a surprise, because usually, Kansas is seen as a conservative state, conservative leaning state. And it was put on the ballot in a primary election, which tends to favor, for some reason, more conservatives usually turn out in primary elections. So conservative state, conservative leaning electorate. But overwhelmingly, Kansas voters said, no, we do think that the Kansas Constitution should continue to recognize that right. We don't want to ban abortion in totality. And there's a lot of sort of searching as to why that happened, why it was this resounding. It was a surprise to a lot of people. But I've seen a lot of the messaging and the ads around this, and it makes sense. It's actually, in a weird way, there's actually a daily episode about this, but they used sort of conservative talking points about, do you really want to change the Constitution? Do you want to have the government force, to tell you what to do with your body? You didn't like it when the government was telling you to wear masks. You really want them to tell you how to, whether or not you can give birth. It was really interesting messaging, but I do think it gets to a fundamental disconnect between the electorate and the elected leaders, because clearly, when you look at poll after poll, the way that Americans feel about abortion is not consistent with the way that politicians feel about abortion. It's just not. It's certainly not consistent with how the Supreme Court feels about it. So there's a real disconnect between that and what you can see it even when in a conservative state, when you put it to a vote, voters do not agree with what their state legislators were trying to do.
So frustrating, because I'm like, what are you guys even doing here? You're supposed to be representing us,
Yeah, and this is the problem with gerrymandering, right? When you are able to, the same state legislators who put this amendment to a vote for the Kansas voters, they also draw their own districts. In most states throughout the country, legislators draw their own districts, which is a fancy way of saying they get to pick who votes for them. So that happens every 10 years. We redraw the lines. So if you wonder why it seems like politicians are so much more extreme than the voters and the state that they represent, it's because they pick their voters in a way that will keep getting them elected, and they don't have to be accountable to voters. Now, obviously, that's not the same with statewide elections because it's the entire state voting. But when you look at district-based elections, so state house, state senate, the U.S. House, that's the reality. And so you end up with a group of people who are representing you who represent only the most extremes.
I can't believe that's just allowed.
I share your concern. Now, there are ways to get around it, right? So you can pass an independent redistricting commission where you have like a group of citizens draw the lines instead of the people serving in office. That's what California did. That's what Michigan did in 2018. They actually had a ballot measure or a state constitutional amendment on the base citizens. So this woman named Katie Fahey was like pissed off about gerrymandering and just started posting on Facebook and getting her friends to post about it too. And then they ended up getting a group together that started volunteering and getting signatures to try to get this on the ballot. And they raised some money and they got it on the ballot, and then it got passed.
That is so encouraging.
Gerrymandering is illegal in Michigan and completely changing how in the first cycle that we're going to see these changes in is this year. This is the first, the new maps were drawn in, this was passed in 2018. New maps were drawn in 2021. They take effect this year. So you have new maps for the U.S. House, for the State House and the State Senate based off of a young woman who was pissed off 4 years ago and completely changed the future of her state. So anyone who tells you that things can't happen, it takes a lot of work and sometimes a lot of money, but it is entirely possible. She went completely around her legislatures and said, fuck this, I'm gonna do something about it.
That's incredible.
We love that. Hell hath no fury, right?
No kidding.
For a pissed off woman.
No kidding.
And we are here for it.
So here for it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, should we do, let's see, second question is about Moore versus Harper.
We kind of just covered that with what that has to do with gerrymandering.
Yeah.
A little bit. There's one additional thing about Moore versus Harper. So it is a case based around gerrymandering, but the ramifications would go far beyond gerrymandering and to really any laws for federal elections, including the presidential election. So the basic idea is that in the Constitution, in two parts of it, it says that state legislatures get to decide the times, places, and manner of elections for Congress. And it says that how we choose our electors, because, we don't vote for president directly. We have this group of electors, and each state has a different number based on its population. How we choose the electors is up to the state legislature. Now, state constitutions have their own rules where they can say, well, even if the state legislature says they want to choose the electors this way, the governor can veto that decision. Or if the state Supreme Court, because every state has their own Supreme Court, says that that law that the state legislature passed is inconsistent with the state's own constitution, they can strike it down. Kind of how the Supreme Court can strike down federal laws. So what's really extreme about this is because the Constitution doesn't say the governor in the state can strike down these laws, it doesn't say that the state Supreme Court can strike them down, or even that the state constitution can allow them. It is this idea that a state legislature can just operate unchecked. It can ignore the governor, it can ignore its own constitution, it can ignore its own Supreme Court, and just decide how elections should be run. And we've never operated like that in the history of the United States. This is a theory that's really gained ground in the last 20 years or so. But it would be a sea change because it would basically allow the groups of people we're talking about who don't very accurately represent us, especially if they're gerrymandered, to have unfettered control of elections for members of Congress and elections for the president, and potentially even taking away our ability to vote for president because we don't have the right to. It's just a courtesy that our state lets us vote as a way to choose the electors. We don't have the right to vote for president in the Constitution. We've never had that right. For the first 100 years of the United States, state legislatures in some states just chose the electors themselves. There was no presidential election. But it's been since 1880 that every state has had a popular vote, as a way to decide the electors. But that states can take that back at any time. And if Moore v. Harper is decided in favor of the plaintiffs, then the legislatures would have this power basically unchecked, and they could have an unprecedented level of control over our elections and ignore their governor, ignore their state constitution, ignore their state Supreme Courts. And it's sort of like, I was talking to one elected official recently who described it as like a nuclear bomb for elections.
That's what it feels like as you start talking about this. I'm like, oh, it gives me a little.
Did that make sense? Was that too convoluted? I can sort of.
No.
Okay.
No, it's just it's scary thought.
Totally. There's no democracy in that at all.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And some would say that there's, not as much democracy in our original design as, we think there was. And there is some truth to that, but we've also expanded democracy over time. We didn't used to be able to vote for United States senators. It was state legislatures that chose senators. And then in 1913, we said, let's let the people choose senators. Obviously, not everybody had access to voting, and the Voting Rights Act in 1965 changed that drastically for millions of Americans. So we've definitely made things more democratic over the years, but this would be a real I don't even want to say leap. This would be a massive, cannon shot backward in history if it were to pass.
Yikes.
Well, that's actually a perfect transition to our next question. Someone wrote in and asked about the Electoral College. What is it, and how do we get rid of it?
So it's a compromise. It was a compromise between a couple ways of picking the president. So, back to the old white guys in the air-conditioned-less room in Philadelphia, they were trying to figure out how to choose the president. And for a long time, for most of the convention, they were like, well, Congress will pick the president. And then they were concerned and be like, well, but, the president is allowed to veto bills. So if they're dependent on Congress for their job, maybe they just will sign everything Congress passes so that they can keep getting chosen as president and not actually veto bills that maybe shouldn't be passed. So they said, okay, that's a really good point. Well, so how else should we do it? And they said, well, in most states, the state legislature at the time chose the governor, so maybe the state legislature can choose the president. They said, well, but sometimes they're slow to act, and some people were like, why don't we just have everybody elect the president? Just do a popular vote across the country. And some people supported that, and some said, well, we didn't have. They didn't say this, but we didn't have Twitter. We didn't have phones and news updates. So people didn't get information quickly. So how would they know who would be a good president if they were somebody from a different state? So at the very end of the convention, they decided to pool all of these ideas. And so they said, all right, well, instead of Congress picking, it's going to be just a bunch of people who have no political power, and their only job is to elect the president. So it takes a little bit of corruption out of the picture because these people can't pass laws. Right. we're going to have state legislatures choose the method of choosing these people. And if they want, they can choose a popular vote. So it kind of cobbled together these different ideas. But one thing the Electoral College also did, which Southern states, agreed to, because you needed 9 of 13 states to agree to the Constitution. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. So there was this compromise, because it's based on the number of representatives plus senators, right? So in a small state like Delaware, you only have 1 member of the House and 2 senators, so you get 3 electoral votes. And then for big states, like Texas next cycle is going to have 40 electoral votes, because 38 members of the House and 2 senators. But the effect of this was because at the time, members of the House were chosen, by population. And how did we count the population? Every free person counted as 1. Every indentured servant counted as 1. Every Native American who didn't pay taxes counted as 0. And everyone else, meaning slaves, counted as 3/5 of a person. So if representatives are based on, counting the population, part of the population is 3/5, so are electoral votes. So Southern states got electoral votes based on their enslaved population.
Oh, I never knew. I never
That couldn't
knew
even
that.
vote. Like,
Who
that
could not
have no
vote.
say in it.
Who had no say.
Yeah.
So a state
bullshit.
like Virginia, in the first presidential election, got it was the biggest state at the time. It had I think it had 12 electoral votes, and 3 of those electoral votes were based on the enslaved population. So it's crazy. And in 1800, the margin of Thomas Jefferson's victory in the initial round of the Electoral College was very small. And if you add up the total number of electoral votes he got just based on the enslaved population of Southern states that voted for him, that margin was bigger than his margin of victory. So some historians say that Thomas Jefferson, rode the backs of enslaved people into the presidency.
I would say so.
Wow. And so, this is what we're still using today.
This is what we're still using today. So that's how it was decided at the convention. But then that other second part is why Southern state, because there were way more eligible voters in Northern states than Southern states.
Right.
Each group of states had about 1.8 million people. So the total population in Northern states was around 1.8 million. The total population, forget the designation of enslaved, free, whatever, 1.8 million. But a significant portion of that 1.8 million in Southern states could not vote. So a popular vote would mean a lot fewer voters to represent the interests in those states. So they had to come up with a system that would make it relatively even. And so that's the system.
Right. Southern states were it's not fair. And I would say there's a lot of unfair things going on right now.
So that's the reason. So that's how we got the Electoral College. So the more important part of your question, how do we get rid of it? So there's three ways to do it. One is a constitutional amendment, which is really hard. Ultimately, you need 38 states to agree to do that. And it almost happened in the 70s. It fell apart because of the filibuster. But it's going to be very hard to do that, because a lot of states benefit from the Electoral College, right? Mm-hmm. Because you always have a minimum of 3 electoral votes. So it doesn't matter how small your population is. If you have this basement of 3 votes, the proportion of electoral vote to voter is much higher in smaller states than it is in bigger states. So for example, let's look at the one of the largest states and one of the smallest states. So based on population a couple of years ago, in Texas, there was about 1 electoral vote for every 550,000 voting age citizens. In Wyoming, there's 1 electoral vote for every 140,000 voting age citizens. So your individual vote for president as a citizen is significantly more impactful in Wyoming than it is in Texas, purely because of how many people live in the state. So the reason is some states may not want to get rid of that. The second way to get rid of it is something called the National Popular Vote Compact, which is an agreement among states to give their electoral votes to the winner of the national popular vote, not the popular vote in their state. Oh. You need, ultimately, in order for this compact to take effect, you need the total number of electoral votes of the states that agree to reach 270. Right now it's at like 195, 196, and I think 15 states and DC have signed on. But that could fall apart at any time, because if one, say you hit 270 and then one state pulls out, you dip below 270, the compact takes effect. So it's very flimsy.
Yeah.
And then the final thing is, if every state has the ability to do this tomorrow, is just give their electoral votes proportionally rather than winner take all. Right now, if you win Texas by, say you get 50.1% of the vote versus 49.9% of the vote, you get all 40 electoral votes from Texas. And the person who got 49.9 gets 0. If you just did it proportionally, where that person, the winner, gets 21 electoral votes and the loser gets 19, at least it more reflects the population. And that's something that any state could do tomorrow if it wanted. Could just pass a law to change how they give. You don't need a permission from Congress. You don't need the Supreme Court to get involved. It's just every state legislature. It, as the common theme, keeps coming back to state legislatures. That's like my thing I scream about all the time where I'm with my friends in very popular parties. But that is like that's where the power is. And if you're mad about the Electoral College, your state representatives could change that tomorrow.
How many states do you think would be like, you know what, let's get rid of it, like right now, if there was a vote today?
I think it would be less than half, probably. I mean, I think it's a good indication of a number of states that have signed on to the compact. So 15, clearly, I'd say there might be another 5 to 7 that haven't signed on, but might support some version of getting rid of this. But, in order to do it as a constitutional amendment, you need to hit that 38 state margin to ratify, to agree. And that's very high. The numbers were there in the late 60s, early 70s. But were killed by Southern senators with the filibuster.
Wow.
But it is it's something that's left over from a much different time. It's obviously has dark roots and ties to slavery. It's a very unique system to the United States. So and the whole like idea of that, it used the original dispute was, some people wanted a popular vote, some people wanted the Electoral College. Plenty of people wanted a popular vote and then signed on to the Electoral College because it was the compromise. So it was never originally it was never like a Electoral College versus the popular vote. It was more of like a popular vote versus Congress choosing the president or legislatures choosing the president. This was just the compromise. Right. So we've all kind of been taught a slightly incorrect version of this in our very limited government civics classes.
Very limited. Do you see in the next 100 years maybe us changing from the Electoral College to a popular vote, or what sort of, like, in your, not ideal, but like what would be the minimum time span of this maybe happening?
I have, let's see, next 100 years. I've got a lot of thoughts about what might happen in the next 100 years. I will say that there are 2 states right now. Right, exactly. I'll say right now there are 2 states that do it a little bit differently. Maine and Nebraska, where the winner of the state gets 2 electoral votes, sort of representing the 2 senators who are statewide, and then the winner of each U.S. House district gets 1 electoral vote for that member of the House. So you can split votes in Maine and Nebraska, and candidates do. So that is at least a little bit more representative of the voters. But the problem is that if every state did that, you'd basically be gerrymandering the Electoral College and the presidential vote, because if it's based on, elections for, or you're using the same districts that you use for the House, like, and those districts are gerrymandered, then you're gerrymandering the Electoral College. So if you were to pass a single bill, it's one of my biggest like solutions is like, I don't understand. I mean, I do understand, but Congress should just pass a standalone bill to fight gerrymandering for Congress. That's it. Just every state has to have an independent redistricting commission. You can't gerrymander the U.S. House. It could be less than a page, just like a simple fix that would have huge ramifications and positive effects for our democracy.
But do you think some of those Congress members are like, but that's how I got here?
Yes.
Yeah.
I absolutely do think that.
Exactly.
But I think that it's also important to force people to vote on that. But I will say that even though, I would say more states right now, and I don't know if it's because of values or because more states are controlled by Republicans, but more Republican state districts are gerrymandered versus Democratic states, but Democratic states gerrymander too. Illinois is gerrymandered. New York is gerrymandered. Massachusetts, my home state of Maryland, is one of the worst offenders of gerrymandering. And all of these states I just mentioned screw over Republican voters and favor Democrats. So it's not a one party does it. It's not in even proportions, but both parties are guilty. So I think maybe you could get some Republican Congress members from those states to sign on to a bill because it affects them negatively.
Yeah.
Totally.
You should run for president, Ben.
I don't want to.
I don't blame you.
I don't want to. It
I don't
seems
think
like a
your wife would
horrible
like that
job.
either.
No, she'd
Jackie
hate
would
it.
be a chic first lady, though.
Ooh.
Honestly,
Can you imagine?
Jackie is a much better politician than I would ever be.
Hey,
She can walk into a room and command it. I mean, she's like a saleswoman on a whole other level.
Totally.
Like she has the like gift of gab of network. Like she has that whole package. And
Yeah.
if she actually did want to do it, I think she could go very far.
I think so too. Well, power couple.
I've never been more ready for a female president. So bring it on, Jackie.
Come on, Jackie.
Well, I know that you have a lot to do, so we'll kind of wrap it up. Besides voting and calling our elected officials, what can we do, Ben?
Yeah, what the hell can we do?
One thing is you can take matters into your own hands and run for office. I think
Wow.
people think that it's this sort of distant thing that you gotta do a lot. Like, I'll put it this way. There's one federal government, there are 50 state governments, and there are 87,625 local governments. Which level do you think we pay the least attention to? The
Bottom of
one
the
with
barrel.
87,000
Yeah.
local governments.
Of course, naturally.
Obviously. So we often think of holding office as something that, it's like running for Congress or running for governor. There are so many local offices that have a resounding impact on our lives that not only do we not turn out for, we don't even know exist. There's an organization called Run for Something.
Oh,
If you go to
yeah.
runforsomething.net, you can take a quiz about what, you can set up a call with them and talk about like what your values are. They'll tell you like what office affects the things at the local level that you care about. They'll even do a consultation with you and help you figure out how to file papers to run.
That's so cool.
Thousands of young people, people in their teens and 20s, have run for local office. Hundreds of them have been successful. And so instead of waiting around for, to try to influence other people to fix it yourself and run for local office. And if that seems like something you want to keep doing it. But this is something that we can all do today to take matters into our own hands. I would also say even starts like just knowing who your representatives are at the federal, state, and local level. Follow them on social media. I follow my representatives on social media. Some of my local representatives I DM with. I mean, you'd be surprised how few people follow them on social media and like interact with them. You can definitely get people to respond that way, and that's obviously something a little easier than calling and talking to like a member of the staff. Maybe it's a member of staff that runs it. I don't know, but some people do it themselves. You could volunteer on a campaign. If you want to if there's a candidate you really believe in, someone like, I don't know, Rochelle Garza in Texas, who's running for attorney general, you could volunteer on her campaign and help her out, or someone else who you believe in. You could attend a town hall. This is something I did for the first time a couple of weeks ago. I went to my city council members town hall. There were maybe in total 80 people there. There were snacks. Everyone talked about what they went over, like the budget for the year. The chief of police was there. The head of the fire department. I mean, is it a chance to interact directly with your city council member, the people who are leaders in your city, and 80 people showed up.
Wow.
And this is a chance to have like a direct conversation with the people who basically, have control over your life at the local level. So not nearly enough of us take that opportunity, and we should.
Totally.
Protesting, donating, obviously, staying informed. One great thing that way to do it is to sort of think about, how do I find out what my elected officials are up to at the different levels of government? So I look at it as I divide it into 4 tiers, and I follow one newspaper for each tier. So if I want to know what Congress is up to, I read the Washington Post, since that is obviously that was the paper that I read when I was growing up, and
Yeah.
that's a paper that I think covers Congress really well. There are other newspapers in Washington you could read, but one to follow Congress's activity, I recommend subscribing to the newspaper in your state capital. So I subscribe to the Sacramento Bee because they report on what happens in the Capitol with the legislature and the governor, and I find out about what state laws are being discussed and considered and coming up for a vote. So that's a great way. Follow the newspaper in your state capital. For my county, I follow the LA Times. Other counties may have a newspaper that generally covers or partially covers what's happening at the county level. And then for my city government, I follow the Pasadena Star News, and that tells me what's happening in Pasadena. So I follow one newspaper for each level of government that affects my life. And I recommend other people, take that approach.
That's so inspiring.
Yeah, I really like that idea because I think right now it's obviously, we all follow 1,000 different things on Instagram. And I think there's such an influx of like a little overly saturated sometimes, but I like that specific agenda of where you get your knowledge. So I think that's a really great point.
Right. And real journalists, not someone's like uncle talking on Facebook.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy just to like repost something really quickly and be like, yeah, I agree. And then you're like, what even is this from? Like, what account is this?
Totally.
So I know I can do a better job at that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little bit every day. It's not like
Right.
you don't have to devote hours of your day every day to doing this. You can just, look at get your email newsletter updates, follow them on social media, just kind of be casually aware. And then if something happens that you're really passionate about or that affects your life or there's an issue you care about, get involved.
Yeah, we love that. It's runforsomething.net, you said?
Runforsomething.net is the website where you can sign up to run for local office. And I know at one point they had a tool on Snapchat. I don't know if it's still up. I think it might be, where if you have Snapchat, you can go to, I believe it's the Discover page or like the app page, and you click on the Run for Something module, and like it gives you a quiz, and you start to answer questions, and then at the end it determines what local office you would be best suited for based on your interests. I don't know if that's still
so
up,
cool.
but I know that if you go to the website runforsomething.net, you can sign up and Zoom with one of the people on their team, and they can help guide you as to what to run for.
Perfect.
Amazing.
We can put that link in our bio.
Yes, and the show notes, everyone. I think that feels
Show
feels
notes.
nice just to be able to take matters into your own hands right now when everything feels so out of control.
Totally.
Well, Ben, God, these have been very informative. We really appreciate your time. We have a question for you, as
Sure.
we will ask all of our guests at the end of every episode. Just because we are a history podcast, and usually we have a cocktail or smoke a joint while talking about some juicy stories. If you had to split a joint with one person from history, dead or alive, and be with them for hours and hours, who would that person be and why?
What a question.
Only one person from history.
Only one person.
I would say Ida B. Wells Barnett.
Oh,
The
Wow.
woman who is one of the founders of the NAACP, and she was she's sort of been forgotten a little bit by history, but she would go investigate lynchings and crimes against African Americans throughout like the early 1900s. And like the reason it was sort of like the early roots of the civil rights movement was this woman risking her life doing investigative journalistic work in the South
Wow.
at a time when like a Black woman doing that was insanely dangerous. And she was basically exposed this whole culture of like post-Civil War, post-Civil Reconstruction racism, and just like the balls it must have taken to go into these very scary, threatening areas, doing this journalistic work, compiling the information that she compiled, then leading to the founding of the NAACP, and that spiraling into the civil rights movement. She is sort of like the founding mother of that movement that I don't think gets enough credit.
No
And I would
kidding.
just like to know what it was like risking your life in that way and being able to, how did she get people to open up to her? How did she get, how did she not get killed doing this? How did she get information? How was she able to make relationships? I just find that so fascinating. Someone should make a movie about her.
We
if-
have to do a
and they
Ram
haven't.
I
episode
know.
about her.
Yeah, we should. Wow, that's an incredible answer. And
Yeah.
what a conversation to have, like a little high. you
Yeah.
I
know?
mean, I was gonna say like maybe that's not like the most lighthearted conversation.
No,
It's like
no,
a
no,
pretty
no.
deep topic,
no,
but
that's
I'm just
sometimes what you need.
And I
I'm
think that
fascinated by her story, and I would just want to know more about it. And maybe I don't know. There's definitely some like really tough parts of her story, and so maybe being high would like maybe it would make it better, maybe it'd make it
Right.
worse. I don't know, but
Who
I'm just
knows?
I would love to pick her brain.
100%.
I feel like she'd be like, I deserve this more than anyone.
Literally, though.
Wow.
The least we could do is get her a joint.
The least.
Yes,
The
that,
least.
that is a perfect answer. Well, Ben, thank you so much. Everyone be sure to follow Ben on TikTok and Instagram at Ben Sheehan. We'll put your handles in the notes and our socials. Ben does really great videos on TikTok and Instagram with current events and about, a minute or so of just what you need to know and what's going on. I know I literally get most of my news from you at this point and watch them over and over and just finally feel like I'm more of an informed citizen. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for your service.
Oh, that's so nice to hear between you and between your aunt. I'm thrilled to have an impact on this podcast.
Of course.
thank
you so
you.
much for coming on, Ben.
Give
That's my
our
pleasure.
fam the best. Tell Chooch I say hi.
I will.
Hopefully she's hanging in there.
She's not. She's she's really mad that she's not the only baby in the house, and
I felt that. I felt that from her photos.
It's a real
I was like,
problem.
it looks like she's upset.
Yeah, she's mad.
Oh, man. Well, thank you again, Ben.
Thanks, Ben. We'll talk to you soon. And everyone
Thank
go
you.
follow Ben right now
Yes,
on
right now.
all of the social medias ever.
Bye.
Bye, Ben.
Bye. This was fun. So how do you want me to do you want me to like upload this audio or
Yeah,
right
what-
answers, wrong answers?
Right
What's-
answers
sorry.
mostly.
Yeah.
Right.
Wrong
That,
answers only could also be
that I
an
mean,
option for her name.
That probably should be at this point.
Right answers mostly. Yes. Okay. Cool. All right. Save the audio.
Okay,
Thank
perfect. Yeah,
you.
you can just send that whenever. We'll probably be posting this in, let's see, 1, 2.
I think we do 3 weeks.
Three-
We do Henry, and then Ben.
Yeah. So you'll be in Monday, the what?
I think it's the 29th.
1, 2.
Yep. Monday the 29th.
Monday the 29th. Yeah. That's when you'll be up.
That was amazing. I feel like I learned so much.
I truly do as well.
I hope it wasn't too like wonky and boring and hard to follow. Like
No,
I get
even.
okay.
No,
Not
this
even.
is truly like what we have needed. It's what our listeners have asked for. So I think this is just going to be a really great and different episode for us. So
Yeah.
we're super
Awesome.
appreciative.
People are pumped.
Good. Well, thank you for having me, and yeah, just send me anything you want me to post when it's up, and
Perfect.
hope to hang soon. Did we ever meet at Winston House? I went like 5 years ago when I worked for Scooter's company.
Well,
Oh.
Corey and I started dating. We just had our 5-year anniversary. So it is possible that
well,
The OG Winston.
so did you? So you must have started dating him right around the time he and I split a house for Coachella.
for Coachella. I know. I'm just like, if walls could talk.
They would say we were tired most of the time.
Yeah, no.
Slept a lot.
I know. I don't. The fact that like Corey, his personality that he goes to Coachella or has a music venue is wild because I would never expect it. But I'm glad you guys had that experience together.
I know that's
We
so
had a-
But
funny.
you guys have. I know it's
Great
a trek, but you've got to come to the new one.
I know. I've heard so many great things about it. Honestly, I'm like terrified. I don't know if Tess told you, but we got COVID.
Yeah, pretty
Um,
bad,
how,
huh?
how are you guys feeling
and
now?
we got rocked. I mean, we feel much better, but my wife doesn't. She gets like a little sick, not like barely anything. Our baby was congested and had a
Aw,
cough,
Sandy.
but I get rocked. I don't know what it is about me, but I get like I'm out for like a week and a
Oh.
half.
It was,
sucks.
I mean, the new variant is no fucking joke. I
Yeah.
got it a couple weeks before you did, and I thought it would be like a bad cold and what everyone was saying, but I can't even imagine what you guys had to go through with having a newborn with that. Like my heart.
Yeah, poor guy.
hurt for all of
I
you.
don't think he'll have any long-term ramifications. I have several, so that's my only worry is like I don't want him to have. But he's so young, and there's no evidence yet. So seeing
Yeah.
that newborns have any like effects beyond just being like a little bit sick, or at least that's like
Totally.
Yeah.
definitely not the norm. So I think he'll be fine, but that's just my one sort of lingering worry. So point is like we never leave we didn't leave our house before this. We
I
left
know.
once in 7 weeks to go to a fucking outdoor birthday party and got COVID.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
God
you know,
damn it.
I'm staying in Pasadena and, you know, yelling at my member of the city council. I'll enjoy this life in the
We need you
in the cream your
there.
neck room.
We need you there. I actually love Pasadena. I've been like going more. I'm filming in South Pass today, but it is such
You
a
are?
lovely neighborhood. I am.
Yeah, and their house is so
My
nice.
family friend
He's dream.
is the head of Film LA for South Pasadena.
No
so
way.
She gives
Oh.
filming
Wait.
permits out.
Joan.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We love Joan. That is so funny. She cannot be nicer.
Joan Aguado's mom and dad were my grandparents' best friends. They were like a throuple.
That is
more of
so
a
crazy.
That's hilarious.
family friends. So my mom and Joan grew up together. Joan's been over to our house. We've gone out and hung out. Like that, we go back decades.
Oh my God. Should we have Joan on the podcast?
Yes, I think
She's
She's
our
so.
next
cool
guest.
as shit. She's
She-
awesome.
She probably has some
Yeah.
stories.
She could not have been nicer. We needed a permit in like a day, and she was amazing. I love Joan.
Tell her that you just interviewed me on the
I
podcast.
Definitely
She's
will. Oh
the
my gosh, that's
sweetest,
so
yeah.
exciting.
That's so cute.
Yeah. Small world.
So small world.
Small world. Well, Ben, when you leave your house next time, come over to Winston. Come hang out with us on the west side.
I would love that. I really
But
would.
We understand the fear right now.
Yeah. And tell Jackie hi for us.
Yes,
I
please
will.
do.
I definitely
We're
will.
we talk about her a
All
lot. Literally every single woman in our
Give
friend
a
group is like, "What's
give,
Jackie doing?"
give a hug and
Do
give
what?
a hug from me to give a hug from me to both of your lesser halves.
Thank you for saying that.
We will tell them you said that. It's good for them
Please
to be
do.
reminded.
Please do.
All right, Ben. Well, we'll talk to you
All
soon.
right.
Thanks so much.
Talk to you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Do I stop
Stop.